and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. Today we're going to continue in terms of learning how to read music, and just like we did last segment and the last segment before that. And so I've got to show you some more symbols and go over some basics. These basics are really very important, and I hate to give it to you in one lump sum, but if you have it, then you know at least what you're dealing with. So let's go ahead to this chart right here. Now, I talk about bass notes and treble notes and where they are on the keyboard. This is the middle C right here. And you notice there are two staffs. There's a treble staff and there's the bass clef staff, the two of them. And the line usually connecting the both of them because they usually played at one time. But when you get to the middle C, which is right here, and I've shown it to you on a keyboard, that middle C is the highest note of the bass clef, but it's also the lowest note of the treble clef. That middle C can be used as both a bass clef note and as a treble note. There's not a problem with that. And so they have that line in between. The low C has that line in between. And you notice I have two stems on it, one right here going up, one right here going down. That's your symbol. It is both a bass and treble clef note. And then when you just go up, now this I've taken it up to the C, but it does go up if I were to have enough space to do it higher than that. So the notes go up, and on the bass clef, the notes go down. Now some treble clef instruments can play around in this part, in this area here. I'm talking about the saxophones and the clarinet. The sax can go to a B flat, which is a half a step below this one, and the clarinets can get in this range. So how do they do it? Well, they're not playing the bass clef. They add ledger lines. Here are ledger lines for here. Well, they add ledger lines below without adding the bass clef, and they're able to play those notes that way. Then this we've pretty much gone over. Here's your bracket, treble, bass, clef played together. The time is 4/4, and the key signature is G because you have one sharp to it. And let's see. You will sometimes find, and so I put this in. I don't know, it may be hard to pick up. There's a little 3 here, and there's a little 6 there. What does that mean? Every so often you'll get a piece of music in which the measures are marked in terms of where they are. 3rd measure from the beginning, 6th measure from the beginning, and it goes through the music. You may have 140, a measure that's numbered 140. That's how many measures it is from the beginning of the piece. It's called a rehearsal marking. I only put 2 of them in here, but you could go on and on and on with it all the way through a piece. Why have a rehearsal marking? Well, if you're rehearsing, then an orchestra may stop, go back to measure 15, and we'll start there. Otherwise, people are saying, okay, we're going to start rehearsing at measure 15 because of something that's come up, and we need more rehearsal time for that. And they sit there, and they count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you know, they're not going to get it always right. So they mark the measure in terms of how many measures they are from the beginning. So you go back to that marking, and you're all together. It just makes it very, very easy in rehearsals to go back to a certain point and rehearse from that point. You might go back to the beginning, in which they would say, start it from the top. That usually means go back to the beginning, or start at measure 10, or start at measure 15, whatever needs to be rehearsed. Everybody can find the number. Everybody knows where they're supposed to be. So it's an ease for rehearsals, and that's why they call it a rehearsal marking. I want to show you the ledger lines. All of these little lines that go below or above the staff are called ledger lines. If I want to play a low E, I don't want to draw my staff with another 3 or 4 lines, because then I'd have like 7 lines to the staff. It would be impossible to read it. So use these lines just for the notes that are below or these notes that are above. On this one, and I'm doing this because for the flute, a regular flute, G, A, B, C, D, 2 ledger lines, E, 3 ledger lines. It either goes through the note or the note goes above it. This is D, E, F, and so forth, until you finally get to the C, which is 5 ledger lines, which the flute can play. The recorder can get up to here, A, B, C. The recorder can play the C, but cannot play any further. And these ledger lines, it makes the notes higher and higher and higher, and the flute can get all of those. Now, on these, we can't play those, basically, but this would be the D, the C, B, A, G, F, E, and this is the way it would appear in the music, like, for example, for a piano or a guitar or some instrument that has the ability to play way low. The C is as low as the recorder is going to get. But there's a B, the saxophone can get that, and around here, the clarinets can get that, because clarinet's an interesting instrument. It's one of my favorite instruments, and I played it a lot. Played it a lot in college. But the clarinet has 2 separate scales, the lower register and the higher register. But they're different fingerings for different notes. With a saxophone, with a flute, with the recorders, the penny whistles, and most of the soprano instruments like that, when you play a high note, it's exactly the same fingering, or it's exactly the same note as a lower register. And you just press a button. With a saxophone, you just press that octave key. It's not called a button, but it's an octave key. It throws you to the same note, but at a higher octave. But you can't do that with the clarinet. The clarinet, you press it, it's called the register key, not the octave key, because you're not getting an octave. You're getting an octave plus 5 other notes, which makes it interesting because you really have to learn 2 separate fingering patterns for two different registers. It makes it a lot more difficult to play, but once you get it, it's natural and it doesn't bother you. I used to do it all the time. So these are the ledger lines. So let me skip over here to the next page. All right, low and middle C right here with 1 ledger line through it, high C that the flutes can do with 5 ledger lines. This is a mid-range C, and this is a high C, and the recorders can do that. And this would be the C above high C, and that's what they call it. Saxophones go to the B flat, and clarinets low F to high F. The saxophones can get up to that high F, but they can't get any higher. That's the highest that the saxophones can do. So this just gives you the range of what some of these instruments are capable of doing. But you would be surprised, even with an instrument with a 2-octave range, the kind of music you can play. You can play a lot of music with 2 octaves. Now, these are octaves. An octave is 8 notes. A low D to a high D, and I'll play that. So you can see it's the same note, but a different range. They're all the same note, but they're in a higher or lower range. So we're dealing with octaves. Octaves are 8 notes apart. Now, here's your B, A, G, F, E, D, which is what I always start students out in learning when I'm teaching them. Over a period of time, they don't learn it all at once, but it's not that hard to pick up. These are exactly the same notes, B, A, G, F, E, D, just a higher range. It's an octave up. A recorder can play that B, and it can play a C higher than that, but it is hard to get, so I wouldn't start students on it. B, A, G, F, E, D, bag-fed. And I used to use that term, bag-fed, whenever I was teaching students, if I was teaching them in a classroom situation, because it's easier to understand. B, A, G, F, E, D. So how do you remember what the notes are on the lines? There is an easy way. E, G, B, D, F. Every good boy does fine. Every good boy does fine. What about the spaces? F-A-C-E, face. So that's an easy way to remember it. There are other ways. Every good boy deserves fudge. Ernie gives Bert dead frogs. You know, I don't use that one, but it is something you can use. That shows you, it helps you to remember if this is going to be a D, every good boy does. D does. If this is an F, every good boy does fine, F fine, or F fudge. And this is always going to be F-A-C-E, that's going to be face. Now it's slightly different for the bass clef. It's not exactly the same, but we're not doing the bass clef, and I don't have it written out here. And as people doing woodwinds, we don't bother with that, but there is another little set of things you can learn. Okay, and here are the octaves, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. D, E, F, G, A, B, C. 2 ledger lines on that C, and that's the highest that the recorder can get. This is a D. Now, the flute can get 1 octave higher than that, but I didn't write it in. These are all octaves, and you can see what they look like. I've seen charts with triple octaves. Now, the 5-line staff, I mentioned it before, but I'll go over it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, treble clef, bar lines or measure lines, bass clef, and the different types of notes. The 8th note, this is a whole note. It's just clear and just a round circle, no coloration in it. It's a whole note. It has whatever the measure says it has in terms of time. Half note, 16th note, the body, the stem, the flags. This is 16th note. It has 2 of those little flags on it. And this is a dotted 8th and 16th. That has 1 bead. There are reasons for that, but I explained that last time, so I don't want to go into it again. This is just for you to kind of remember. And then, I don't know as you can see this, but the bass clef can start right here. If we can get that scale, the bass clef is right here at this middle C, because remember, it is the highest note of the bass clef, and it just runs down. Now it runs down further than that, but I'm limited in space. And here it becomes a treble, the lowest note of the treble clef, and goes up here. So your bass clef really starts here. Your treble clef also really starts here, up or down. And you see, I run out of space, but I've got all of these notes with these ledger lines, so you can see that. I want to describe a stinger. A stinger is when you play something and it's the last note and it's a dot, there's a little dot there. That's a staccato note. A staccato note has a dot, whichever note it is, and I'm going to show you one on the next page, on top, and it means cut that note short. Now, I don't know if I can play this. This actually comes from March. I don't know if I can see it well enough to play it, but I'm going to try it. And if you can follow along with that, if you can follow along with the music, when I get to the end of it, I'm going to use the stinger and play that note real short. See that last note? And actually, I didn't play that song. I played another one because it just came to me and I decided to go with it. But anyway, when you get that last note, it's usually done in marches. When you get that last note and there's a dot on top of it, that is a staccato note. And you stop real quick. and they make that note real short. Now, if I look at this page, all of these notes here are staccato notes. All of these notes that have the dots, it can be on the bottom, it can be on the top, they're all staccato notes. And what you would do is you would play them very, very short, such as usually, you do get it in some music, but in marches, a lot of times you get it on the last note, as I said before. Those are all staccato. You don't speed up the music. If the music is a certain speed, you don't speed it up because the note is shorter. You keep it the same speed that it's been written, but you just make the note shorter. Although usually you use it on faster music. So these are staccatos. Now the other thing I want you to see on this page is the that's a fermata. This is a fermata. It means hold, and you'll get it on some notes, like this one right here on the end. That's a fermata on top of that note. Now that means you can hold that note as long as you want to. It doesn't matter how long you hold it. You can hold it as long as you want to. Now you wouldn't want to hold it unreasonably long, but if you think you need to hold it long because it makes the piece nicer as it fades out or whatever, then just hold it as long as you want to. And these here are hold marks. You know, it's connecting one note with the other. If you were to play them, you tongue that one, and then you just hold it together as if it were one note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's what the fermata is. You can get jerseys. I've noticed them in these gift catalogs. They'll say, "Hold me, I'm a fermata." That's supposed to be some kind of a joke, I guess. Now, repeat marks. I need to show you about repeat marks. We've used them before. The 2 lines and 2 dots on each end. Two lines and 2 dots. And if you were to play this music, you play and you get to the repeat sign, and you play it again, just once. When you repeat it from the sign, repeat sign to the repeat sign, and just play it once. And then I've got this. Then once you finish playing it for the second time, you just go on with the rest of the music. And then I've got another repeat here. It's just a repeat of one measure, but that's all right. You can repeat however measures that you want. Now, for this sign here, this you play the measure just before it, just once. That's all, just once. So you're playing along, and you get here, and the actual little slash marks above it wouldn't be there. I just put them there to draw your attention to it. You would just have no slash marks. You'd play along, and you'd get here, and when you got here, you'd repeat this again, but just once, no more, unless you put a number on top of it indicating how many times you wanted it repeated. I'll show you a little more about that later, and then you just go on with the music. So if you look at this, here you're playing, and here again in the music you wouldn't have the slash marks. I just wanted to draw your attention to it. But you're playing the music, and you come to this. There are 3 of them. That means you repeat this previous message 3 times, measure 3 times. You play this, and then you repeat it 1, 2, 3 times, because you've got 3 of these signals. Or if you wanted to, you could play here, and when you get here, there's a measure mark, there's a 4. That means you repeat this measure, just this measure, no other measure, just the immediate measure preceding that sign. You play that 4 times. Otherwise, if you wanted it repeated 4 times, you'd have to add 4 of these measures all marked like this, like I did 3 of these measures marked like that. So it's an easy way to repeat music without constantly doing repeat signs, and you can mark it for however many times you want to have that repeated. Okay, now accidentals. Accidentals are sharps or flats that you get into, that you play because somebody wrote them in, but they're not in the key signature. If they're in the key signature, they're not an accidental. So I'm going to go into that a little bit more. I think we've got time for it. Here's your B flat, and it's in the key of F. F is what got 1 flat, 4/4 time, and this G sharp is not in the key signature, so it becomes an accidental. And that accidental only goes for that 1 measure, not any more measures. And if you want it repeated, let me show you this, then I'll explain that. Here we go. This is an accidental, and now it is held into the next measure because the note is the same. So if you have an accidental toward the end of a measure and you're holding a note to the following measure, that G also remains an accidental because you're not going to change the key signature on it because it's being held with that note. So it's like 1 note instead of 2. I hope that makes sense. I want to do a little bit more work with this. Let me see. Okay. So here, this is an F sharp. This is a C sharp. You want that C sharp because it's important to the music. That becomes an accidental. That means every C in that measure will be sharped because it goes for the entire measure. And then this will also be the accidental because it's held on to an accidental in the end of that measure. And then this is not an accidental. It goes back to the normal one again. Arpeggios are chords. I gotta watch my time. We can't play chords on woodwind instruments, but if you play 3 notes together, you have a chord. And guitars can do it, pianos can do it. And that's a chord. 3 or more notes, and you don't have to limit it to 3 notes, but however many notes you play, they play together. So an arpeggio, which woodwinds and brass play, you play the same notes, but you play them separately. We play the notes separately because we can't play them together. So it's called a broken chord, or it's called an arpeggio. The chord, you can see as it's written, all of the notes are written like they're being played at the same time, because one is right on top of the other. But with the arpeggio, you have to write them separately because you have to play them separately. Usually they're played fairly fast because you're kind of trying to mimic what a chord can do. Now, we're kind of out of time. I still have a little bit more to do, but I don't have a lot to do. So I'll finish with this next time for sure, and then I'll go over some music with you so you can see how it's played using what you've learned from these 3 sessions of reading music. So I'll close it here. Please join me next time.